Okay, let's see if we can get the view down here and we good to go. Awesome. Mark Fischer, New York Post, Belisario, Penn State, welcome.
I'm happy to be here.
And so where is here? Where are you at right now? Even though you're a New York Poster in digital sports, where are you at? How did you get there?
So I'm in Keyport, New Jersey right now with my girlfriend and her mother. Uh, got here a couple of days ago. Had been quarantining beforehand. And yeah, we before that I live in Hoboken, right outside New York, but have been working remotely since March.
Wow. But how did it go down with the switch to remote? Did you see that coming? And what's the transition been like? How's your workday different?
Yeah, so late February, early March, my girlfriend and I we actually had a vacation plan to go out to Arizona and California. Um, and before then, I was thinking, okay, I don't. Nobody at that point really knew how bad it was going to be, but I was thinking, let me take my laptop home in case there's a chance it goes remote. So we were out west, and then that's when Tom Hanks was
Yeah.
contracted the virus. I remember refreshing Twitter. We were out and about in Arizona, but I kept on refreshing Twitter, seeing what was happening with March Madness, and watching ESPN as the Jazz game was canceled and the NBA was just completely put on hold. So we actually ended up cutting our vacation short, and I came back, and like I said, thankfully I had my computer. Um, the transition it was pretty seamless, actually. Doing a lot of Zoom calls like this, as you've been doing with your students, a lot of Slack and whatnot. I've enjoyed it. Obviously, given the circumstances, I would rather be in the office, but it's been okay. I work, a lot of the nighttime shifts, so 4 p.m. to midnight. So it's nice being able to, shorten my commute. Go from my desk straight to bed. Uh, so that hasn't been too bad.
Not much traffic.
Yeah.
Well, to get some of the basics out of the way, your job title and your basic duties, and then we'll backtrack to your career in Penn State and some of those good stuff.
Yeah, so I'm considered a digital sports editor. So I'm working, totally digital, um, editing stories, producing them using our content management system, posting them, working with Photoshop, social media, working with all of our writers, making sure their stories are getting up on the site as soon as possible, as well as maintaining the national story scene. So obviously, if there's a breaking story, Steelers Ravens game, gets postponed, we jump on that right away. We have writers who are writing stories just like that. So always just being in contact. I have Twitter notifications set up on my desktop, so I have a bunch of the big guys, that's such as like Adam Schefter, Rappaport, Woj, obviously, and when they're sending tweets and news is breaking, in constant contact with my fellow digital editors, and then as well as our writers.
And you're at the New York Post, we should say.
Yes. Been at the Post for a little bit over a year. Before then, I was at the New York Daily News. That was kind of a weird. So I had interned at the Daily News during college, and was grateful enough to get a job out of college at the Daily News. Was laid off there were mass layoffs about a couple months after I was hired. Then a couple months after that, they realized that they needed bodies in the office, so then they brought me back.
Wow.
Yeah, so that was kind of a weird introduction to the professional industry for sure. But once I saw this opportunity at the Post arise, I thought it would be a little bit more stable. And they at the Daily News sports staff, back then it was such bare bones, compared to what it used to be, and it just didn't feel like it didn't feel like the right environment, or even just like a sports journalism environment at all. Um, so moving along to the Post, it's grateful for that opportunity, and been pretty happy ever since.
Well, so they're kind of the twin towers uh, of of frontline sports journalism in New York City, to be at those two places over the course of a couple of years. And where are you from? I forget.
I'm from Marlboro, New Jersey. So
Okay, so you grew up reading those papers. You're a New York City guy. What? So what can you compare and contrast those two? And did you grow up reading those papers?
So I grew up reading more of the Bergen Record. So growing up, I was a huge New Jersey Devils fan. So I was, following their hockey coverage. And, I've always kept up with Larry Brooks, who's, been the post hockey writer and New York Rangers writer for, over 2 decades now. But yeah, it was certainly interesting. I remember, even on my way out from the Daily News to the Post, telling my coworkers there, it was a little awkward at first, you know, um, but they all understood and they were pretty cool about it. But yeah, I mean, uh, it's 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 interesting. Like you said, the two tabloids that have been going at it for years and years. Very similar in terms of especially like writing headlines, obviously, and I guess the way they do business in terms of they're gritty reporters who will do anything, are going to get the story. They're on top of their beat. They're the best at what they do, and just soaking in whether it was if I was fortunate enough to be sent out on the field, learning from those guys and soaking, like I said, soaking in everything they're doing and kind of using, implementing what I see from there into my own job. But yeah, it was really cool going from one to the other. Yeah, I know in the past they said that if you left the Daily News and you went to the Post, they would have security drag you from your desk. Uh, fortunate, Fortunately for me, that was not the case.
Well, you mentioned hockey. We're going to go back to. I know you were a hockey guy for the Collegian, um, but what's your daily job like? And when you say producer stories, what does that entail?
Okay, so I log in at 4 most days. So I work, Saturday through Wednesday, but I log in at 4. So at that point where they have their, wire meeting going over what stories are on the budget, what's going in the paper. So I'm always, cognizant of what stories are coming in, and prioritizing what stories we should be posting. If Joel Sherman, our baseball writer, has an inside scoop, we're gonna try to get that up right away. But also, when I'm coming in, there are stories that are already in the process of being built. So I will, look over some of those stories, fine tune headlines, coordinate with uh, the other digital editors on how we want to go about posting this story. And another part of my job is also controlling like the sports homepage, controlling the layout of it. So
Oh wow.
that's it's kind of like I think of it like a puzzle, I guess, because I'm always tracking analytics, so I'm seeing what stories are doing well and what stories should be the centerpiece of the homepage. What should be right under that. So I don't know. It's a lot of responsibilities. I'm also writing stories as well, stories that are popping up, as well as every few weeks or so I try to pitch a story myself to our sports editor, and I kind of write that on my off days. Um, I was the writer for our Beating the Bushes beat, which would be covering minor league baseball covering Yankees and Mets prospects for the paper. So you're pretty much doing it all, but it's no day is really ever the same, I guess, because you can't really dictate what's in the news cycle. Um, but yeah, doing a lot of things, posting stories, editing, writing, and whatnot.
You're a mark of all trades.
Yeah.
I find that that jigsaw puzzle as you put together a homepage with the analytics. Are you rewriting headlines, moving stories around, and it's real time analytics, so you can see what stories are getting what play.
Yeah, exactly. So um, I have we use Parsley, which is pretty standard analytics software. I know there's also I use Chartbeat at the Daily News, but I have an app on my phone that I'll pretty much just have my phone out and be tracking the numbers constantly. It can get addicting at points. You don't want
That's
to do too much.
great though.
Yeah, it's cool. You don't want to let it dictate you too much because there are some, stories that don't warrant that much attention. They just might be doing well because they got a good social push, but that they won't necessarily jibe with our audience who are visiting the homepage as much. But yeah, no, it's cool being able to kind of use that as a have that guide me a little bit in terms of that. So yeah, we'll rewrite if a headline isn't working, we'll definitely go back and we'll be like, okay, this isn't working. What about this? Let's try that. You know, we're constantly. I'm sending hundreds of messages a day to all the other guys on our team. Um, but yeah, that's part of my job that I really do enjoy because, like you said, it's kind of just a jigsaw puzzle. You're just looking for the formula that works the most, and you're trying to get as many eyeballs on your stories because a lot of our writers are putting in a lot of work into these stories, and you want to advertise them as well as possible.
And that's a standard line, but I think I mean, obviously it's true. Eyeballs on a story. What moves the needle? What do people really like to type of story, type of, whether it's sport or headline or angle? And then I think it's neat to hear you say that you can't totally go down that wormhole either. So what are some of those things? And then how do you balance that out?
Um, of course, I mean, journalism today is like such a, I guess, cesspool in that there's so many outlets out there, right? There's the New York Post, the Daily News, but there's the Athletic, there's obviously Newsday, the Bergen Record, but then there's tons of blogs covering those teams as well. So it's stories that that you have that make you stand out. So whether it's a scoop, we have a source telling us that the Yankees are going to tender Gary Sanchez. That hasn't happened yet. Deadline's Wednesday, so maybe when this is posted, we'll know. But anyway, just as an example. But just inside scoops like that. I mean, and it seems kind of obvious, but I think a lot of people, with the internet is still pretty young, but even just a few years ago, um, I think some outlets they would just try these clickbaity stories, whether it's listables or things like that. And maybe those worked then, but those aren't going to generate much traffic now. It's you know the, it's the journalism pieces. I think that you put a lot of blood, sweat, and tears into over a long period of time, and you're telling a very cool story. Those are going to do well, whether it's features about you know uh, I don't know. It's just different type of features, and obviously breaking news is big, and then also following up, doing a lot of follow ups on different stories that we see. If we see a certain story is trending very well, we'll be like, okay, what's another angle we can take to that?
Oh, that's great. Yeah. So but I like to hear you that you have an underpinning and a foundation of journalistic ethics, but then advancing the story. That's very cool. I'm I read I read a lot of the post. I should know his name, but you do guys do a great job with TV sports. You break a ton with TV sports.
Andrew
Why is
Marsh.
it- Yeah, that's who it is. Why is that so important? And I imagine you get a lot of eyeballs, right?
Yeah, no, he does well analytically for sure, and he's on top of his beat. He's great. Even he breaks a lot of news, like you said, but he does a lot of cool features. For instance, Craig Carden, big talk show radio host in the New York area. He works for WFAN. He served some time in prison for fraud, and he was a gambling, he's a recovering gambling addict now. And Craig Carden, he's going to trust a guy like Andrew Marsh and to
Oh,
tell him.
sorry to interrupt. He was on with Boomer, right?
Yeah, he was on.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Okay.
and now he's got a midday show. But yeah, so he was on with Boomer Size, and you know, Martian writes a very nice feature, very solid feature on him. It's not a puff piece by any stretch of the imagination, but telling all sides of the story. But a lot of from what I gather, a lot of sources trust Andrew to tell his story. He did a brilliant feature on Malika Andrews, who's a standout ESPN broadcaster now. She does a lot of NBA work, and she's great. Yes, and he just breaks a lot of stories, and that's what it comes down to. Cultivate, and he's been doing it for years. Cultivating different relationships with sources and whatnot. So he originally worked at the Post covering the Mets in the early 2000s. Then he went to ESPN, covered the Yankees. So he's got a lot of experience. And then I guess 3-4 years ago he returned to the Post, and he's always working, which is great to see. And he's great. When I was working on a story, a sports media related story, he was just a call away. We would text back and forth and whatnot, and he would help me gain, contacts and whatnot. But yeah, he does a great job, and that's also such a, not to go on too long, but that's also such a niche field.
Yeah.
Not everyone is covering sports media, but people are interesting. They're not just interested in what happens, inside the lines. They're interested in, the whole operation that is the world of sports. So yeah.
Yeah, I'm a big fan of his. Well, let's talk about Fish. When you look at your collegiate days, and I had to double check this, sports editor, social media, everything from rugby to women's basketball, and I think your true love was hockey. But how doing all those things, it sounds like a lot of what you did there really fits what you're doing now.
Yeah, I would say so. I mean, I was really, once I got to the collegiate, I was very, I was very into like the digital aspect of it. I didn't really do much on the print side, some of which I regret, just because it's nice to have that on your resume too. But yeah, when I got there, so I started at the collegiate the summer before my freshman year. I did the LEAP program, which I'm sure is still around and your students have gone through. I had always wanted to become a journalist. So I joined, and then, that fall I covered women's rugby or men's rugby, or maybe both. I can't quite remember. But, but that was cool because, I have never played or watched rugby in my life, and, learning the sport, and also, a sport like that, they're a very successful program at Penn State. Don't get me wrong, but
they're winning national championships. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. But they're not getting as much media attention as football, of course. So it'd be cool to kind of, talk to the, have kind of unlimited access because, they want as much coverage as they can get, quite frankly. Getting my reps in, just, learning how to communicate with players and whatnot. Then after that, I did women's basketball. And like you said, I'm a big hockey guy. Women's basketball, it was pretty cool for me too because they were, they had been so successful. When I started covering them, they were kind of, on the downswing a little bit. So that was, very interesting. And trying your hand at different things and seeing, what works and what you like. And then when I covered men's hockey my junior year, that was awesome because hockey, my number one sport, and they ended up winning the Big Ten tournament, which was great. I remember sitting in the collegiate office with Colin Pyatt, who I'm pretty sure he writes for SB Nation, covers Penn State sports,
and he works for Pagula too, doesn't he?
I think he does. I don't know if he did at that point.
No, I don't think he did. Yeah.
But I remember we were sitting in the office. It was the semifinals. If I got this wrong, he'll let me know. But they beat Minnesota in overtime, and we looked at each other and we were like, all right, we have to drive to Detroit. Like we can't miss the final. Credit to Sarah Sivian and Onward State. Sarah, of course, who's doing a great job covering the Hurricanes for The Athletic. They were there since the beginning of the tournament. We're like, all right, we got to get to Detroit. Drove to Detroit the next day.
Straight through.
Yeah, it was, it was a fun drive, and it was myself, Jill, Colin, and Jill Beckman, who now she runs social media for the Tampa Bay Buccaneers.
Yeah.
And Lindsay Fagan, who one of the best photojournalists I've worked with. But yeah, and then watching them, beat Wisconsin in double overtime. That was crazy. I was writing the game story. I can't even remember, just rushing in a couple grabs right after they scored because we have to rush down to the press conference room, sending it into our editors. Garrett Ross was the editor-in-chief at that point. He's at Political now. And then I remember just after going back up to the press box and just sitting in my seat and kind of just like soaking in everything. And, I'm like a 19-20-year-old kid. And I'm just like, all right, I got to make this story as great as it can possibly be. I don't want it just to be, the run of the mill gamer. We have to go big picture. You have the,
Liam is the program, right?
Yeah, exactly. Winning a championship that quickly. And then, the guy who scored the goal, Liam Folks, I mean, he was a solid player, but he wasn't as heralded as some of the other freshmen on that team. But yeah, and then after that, I I was a digital managing editor, so kind of overseeing the digital effort of the Collegian, working alongside our editor in chief Sam Ruland and managing editor Lauren Davis. Working a lot with social media, working with headlines, and that was more in tune with what I'm doing now professionally.
That's a great story. It made me think of three things. I'm going to say these, then we can go back to them. Getting your reps in. I think that's, and you did it while you were in school. So I'd like to hear your thoughts on that. And then a lot of people in some really big name brand jobs already for that. And then the collaborative nature and how important that is in today's world, even though, your office is your bedroom. So let's go with getting your reps in while you're in school.
Yeah, it's so crucial. Because I mean, those are the clips that you're going to be handing to different outlets that you're applying to for internships and jobs, after graduation. So so important to just put yourself out there, whether it's the Daily Collegian, that's the route I took, Onward State, or the Underground, or other media outlets that may pop up at Penn State while you're there. Um, you know, you'll probably have to make some sacrifices along the way, right? I remember when when the Eagles won the Super Bowl my senior year. Everyone is, all the Eagles fans. Not that I'm an Eagles fan, but all the Eagles fans and all my buddies, they're getting loaded for the game and they're rushing out on, College Avenue celebrating. I remember, having an office set up like at my kitchen table in my grungy apartment, and working with all of our reporters who are out on the scene. So you'll have to make some sacrifices for sure, but in the end, I think it's all worth it if this is the industry that you want to get into, because it's extremely competitive. And you have to make yourself as versatile as possible, I think, and listen to your professors like Mike and John Affleck and all the other guys you get and gals you got at the Curly Center who will be able to guide you well.
Well, Penn State creates opportunity. It's whether you avail yourself of that. But I think you're talking about Politico. You're talking about Joe Tampa Bay. This little newspaper called the New York Post. I mean, that's a couple of years out of school. Was it just a seminal class there, or do you think these days, if you're good and you're multi-talented, that you can rise faster?
Um, I guess probably like a combination of both, I guess. Um, I mean, a lot of it comes down to, connections you gain along the way, and, always staying in contact with those people. Everywhere I've worked, there has been a Penn Stater, at the Daily News, at the Daily, at the New York Post. Um, but, another thing I would say is, um, that doesn't, everyone's path is also different, right? I think it's incredibly important. My role is more on the digital side, but had I wanted to carve out a career more so as a reporter, I think it would have been more beneficial for me to work at, maybe a smaller newspaper than, somewhere in New York, just because you're going to be given more opportunities
Right.
there. And there's going to be more flexibility, and, you put in your reps there, and then, other papers will certainly come calling.
Well, and I'll elaborate a little bit on the collaborative is that you mentioned, and maybe it was before we came on air, how smoothly it's kind of gone. So, what are the logistics these days of what you do in a pandemic versus being in a newsroom? And then where do you see the industry headed in that direction?
Mhm. Yeah, so we use Slack, which I guess is like the office version of GroupMe, which I'm sure all your students use. Um, and we're just constantly communicating. We have at 4 p.m. I'll sometimes log on for our budget meeting, which is with our sports editors, and the Slack guy who is basically in charge of coordinating the layout of the paper at night, and in charge of going over proofs and headlines and all that stuff, and just communicating every chance you get. You know, the thing I love about this job is that you're always on deadline, so you can't really drag your feet. compared to other jobs where you may have a project that lasts for a couple weeks or even a month at a time. I kind of just like that. And then also the adrenaline rush you're getting when a breaking news story is happening, especially if it's a local story. Um, you know, waiting for the Jets to eventually fire Adam Gase, for instance.
Eventually.
Yeah, even when that does happen, and it's obviously a very sure thing. Getting that little adrenaline rush, getting that story online. Okay, what other story we're gonna say? Are there players who are trash talking him on social media? What are our beat reporters hearing behind the scenes? Um, but going back to your question, you have to just always, you can't be afraid to put yourself out there, and there's no stupid questions. I know that's obviously a cliche, but it's a cliche because it's true, right? If you're not sure about something, um, and if I'm not sure about something, always asking our Slack guy, always asking, the guys who are above me. If I'm unsure of, hey, the sentence sounds weird to me, should we move that, or maybe don't go there, or this and that. Um, but yeah, I kudos to our copy desk on the print side, putting out a paper every day, and that is up to par with the pre-pandemic things. It's incredible. They're coordinating on Slack and on Google Hangout and like video chats like this as much as we are doing on the digital side, and then so much of it crosses over. We're talking with them, they're talking with us. Um, so yeah, it's been pretty good, and I like being able to I like working from home. I think you miss out on different opportunities when you're not in the office actually talking to people. But given the circumstances, I do enjoy, you know, um, being able to sleep a little bit later, not having to commute during the day and commute late at night. Um, so it hasn't been too bad.
Hey, can you be, given what you do, can you still be a sports fan? Or can you be, or is it, can you not be a fan of the New York teams? Or how does that work?
No, I think you can still be a fan as long as you don't let it interfere with your work. Me personally, growing up, it was just all hockey, so I was a big Devils fan. So I haven't had really a hard time with that conflict. Unfortunately, we don't cover the Devils as much. They're not a New York team, obviously. Um, but I think you're able to, as long as you don't let those biases interfere. And sometimes it'll happen no matter what, but you have to just be very careful of that. Obviously, if you're covering the Yankees and you grew up a Yankees fan, you're not going to be cheering in the press box. Rule number one, right? Um, I think it is possible, but I think also as you continue to work at that job, your fandom will just erode. Um, just because it's just, I don't know. You're
No, because it becomes, as I say a lot in class, it's not just the sports, it's the industry. So you know how the sausage is made. You hear the real stories.
Yeah, that too, and then also, sometimes, um, and when I'm off, sometimes I just unplug completely. I think that's really important also. Um,
Good advice.
sometimes I can't help but to check what's trending on the site, but I try to just not watch unless it's a Penn State game, of course, Penn State football. Maybe not as much this year, but um, I try to unplug as much as possible, and I never catch myself rooting for a team or anything, just because I guess that's just never really how I was, except when it came to the Devils.
Well, good answer. Speaking of Penn State football, what do we know about Saquon?
Yeah, yeah, it's so sad. Past couple seasons, him being knocked out. I don't have any inside information, unfortunately. I know, but hopefully he does come back. Just because he is a Penn State guy, I guess I have a little bit of a rooting interest in him, right? Um, but I'm sure when he comes back next season, second year with this offense, Daniel Jones, the quarterback, continuing to progress. I'm hoping that he'll have the breakout season that he really should have at this point.
Does he move the needle for you guys?
Traffic wise,
Yeah,
uh, definitely. Obviously, we're not writing about him as much,
right
of
now.
course,
Yeah.
with him hurt.
Unless
But
he stops drinking and stuff.
well, yeah, well, that's when you bring that out. Like, I guess last month or so. So I guess it was a Saturday. So I was working. So on Saturdays I work the day shift, so I log on at like 9. So we see these clips of him and Daniel Jones out and about, drinking, hit Saquon was he was like riding a bike, which was very concerning given his injury, and it was a couple days or like a week before he was due for surgery. But that was kind of an interesting story, seeing that develop, and it's also just like, okay, we cover the Giants. We're not going to write off this clip because you don't know the context of it. You don't know if it's from last year. You can't rush to judgment. You're going to have to reach out to the person who posted it. You're going to obviously have to reach out to the Giants, see if we can get any contact from Jones or Barkley. But that was a very interesting story. I mean, we had an email thread that probably had like 50 emails between myself, the Giants writers, our sports editors who saw the story and logged on and giving their 2 cents. So he moved the needle then for sure, just because it was very bizarre story. But anyway,
kind of story I like. How did it resolve? Because was it current? How did
it was current. So I guess the Giants. It wasn't just them; it was a few other players as well. They went out to dinner in Manhattan. It was late, and this is what we found that they had like a private room at a restaurant, and then they were invited to a bar that had been closed due to the pandemic. That's where they were. However, I know that I'm pretty sure they faced. I don't know if it was a fine, so don't quote me on that, but I'm sure they faced some disciplinary measure from head coach Joe Judge, who runs a tight ship over there. I know they said that obviously after the fact that they can't be doing stuff like that, but it wasn't anything totally blown out of proportions. I don't believe they were fined or anything by the NFL, and it didn't, to my knowledge, lead to any COVID cases on the team, as we've seen with pretty much every team nowadays.
That's my kind of story. I love that stuff, and then I love hearing the back and how the challenge that you had as a member of media. Well, we've reached the conclusion here. This is the life advice portion of the program. Fish, okay. So you have students and you guys, you have 3 takeaways and 1 big takeaway. You can decide if Mark's life advice for you, sitting in New Jersey, but running the New York media empire at the Post, whether you want to make it personal or professional, Mark, but we'll see how much of this advice ends up as one of the big takeaways from today.
I guess just always putting me on the spot here. Not actually. I think just always putting yourself out there. Don't be afraid of criticism that you're going to get, because you're going to get a lot of it. You just have to take that and learn from it and move on. You never get too down on yourself, and then also just work your butt off. I mean, I know those are really general, but I guess like an example of that would be
drive to Detroit. That's an example of
that.
Yeah,
there you go. But even recently, so like I said, I would write on Mets and Yankees prospects, but those stories were largely done on my off days. So taking a bus to Scranton, PA, and speaking with Clint Frazier, who now is one of the stars of the Yankees, I guess. But back then, he had been sent down. He was, he had been in trouble with the Yankees. Made questionable comments. Taking a bus, to Scranton, and writing that story, and waiting for him to appear in the locker room. Talking to him by myself, and just shooting the shit with the guy, and making him feel comfortable with me. I got a face he's never seen before. And just always, you gotta just put in the work. Nothing in this industry especially is ever going to be handed to you. And then always seek out advice as you need. When I was in college, I was always reaching out to collegiate alumni who were in the professional ranks, and they helped me out a lot. And I'm sure Mike will give you my contact information if you ever want to pick my brain at all, or seek any advice you may have. Never be afraid to reach out. No matter where you work, you'll likely run into a Penn Stater. I'm sure that was part of the pitch to get you to come to Penn State, but it is honestly very true. So just so I guess circling it a little bit, rounding it out, just always don't be afraid to really put yourself out there. I guess is the key takeaway.
No, that's great stuff. I love the metaphor. I'm gonna steal this Take the bus to Scranton. That's great career advice. But it is. No one else did it. And you were the only one in the locker room. To me, taking the bus is great, and then you're the only one there. That makes the story work. That's great stuff. That's a terrific lesson. So we're going to say goodbye. Folks, we're probably a little over 30 minutes here, but Fish, thanks a lot for coming. I'm going to hit the stop record button and we'll chat a little bit later. Oh, Penn State Rutgers on Saturday. What's the spread? Who you picking?
I mean, I think Penn State. I think that win over Michigan. I mean, they should win out, right? I think they should. I don't know. I don't know what the spread is. I mean,
Michigan State just beat Northwestern. You know, it's Mel Tucker's not doing a bad job.
No, that is a good point. I think if they can keep the offense simple and allow Sean Clifford to play to his strengths, like they clearly did against Michigan, and their running game is coming to life with the two freshmen, and then you got Parker Washington who's lighting it up at wide receiver. I think I don't know what the spread is, but I'll take Penn State against it for sure.
Oh, man, you know your stuff though. You threw out all the key names. All right, Fish, thanks a lot. Appreciate it. Okay, guys, see you in a bit.
Take care.